Hello, this is Dr. Harriet Fraad bringing you Capitalism Hits Home, a program about how personal life and economic and political life co-shape one another. And this in turn is brought to you by Democracy at Work. Today, in honor of Valentine's Day, I want to talk about love, a topic that the left usually does not engage. However, it's important. You can't turn on a radio without hearing pop music, which is overwhelmingly about romantic love. Romantic love is one kind of love, and it has a component of exclusivity and eroticism. That's the kind of love that used to lead to marriage and family. There was a song, "Love and marriage go together like a horse and carriage." Well, that's not true anymore, but that's what used to be true. And that's what Valentine's Day still celebrates. However, there's other kinds of love that are not celebrated. And of course, romantic love is exclusive of two people. It's not the social love that connects people in a revolutionary or other way. But there can be a different kind of love. In the words of Che Guevara, at the risk of seeming ridiculous, let me say that the true revolutionary is guided by a great feeling of love. It's impossible to think of a genuine revolutionary lacking that quality. And in the more current words of Cornel West, never forget that justice is what love looks like in public. There are other kinds of love, or what's called love, like the love of money, the love of competition. I wouldn't call those love. I would call those compulsions to get ahead, very prevalent in our capitalist system. Karl Marx nailed it, I think, when talking to some big department store owners, capitalists, of course. He said, accumulate, accumulate, accumulate. That is your Moses and your prophets. And that's the kind of love that was portrayed in a film by Costa Gavras, the great filmmaker who brought Us Missing and Z, in a film called Capital, which only played in the United States for about a week or 2 weeks, and portrays a man so driven by accumulation and money that he alienates all his personal relationships. And when they point that out, that he's losing everyone close to him, he says, I'm winning. I don't care. I'm winning. And that is a win in the capitalist system. But I wouldn't call that love. I would call that compulsion. Changes in the United States make marriage much, much more difficult. So that even that kind of love or that kind of romance is dwindling. Americans even have less sex than they ever did before. For the first time in American history, the majority of American women are single, and by choice. The gender norms that used to nurture that kind of romance and American ideas of love and marriage have radically changed. Why? And how? Well, until the period beginning in the mid-70s, men married women, and women accepted their gender role as housekeepers, child producers, child care workers, and carers for the emotional life of men and for their social connections, men's social connections with their children, their relatives, and often their couple friends. Until that time, in the early 70s, the overwhelming majority, 70% or over, of Americans were white. Minority men never got family wages. And beginning in the mid-1970s, white women had to join their minority sisters and work outside the home, which that capitalist greed that outsourced their families meant that the gender norms based on women's full-time labor in the home, for the majority who were white, and men's work for family wages that supported dependent women and children, that was over. The big companies went to places like China with a $3.10 an hour wage, and Pakistan with a little over $1 an hour wage instead of 25, and Bangladesh and so on, all under $4. They also had no ecological protections. Those had been won by union struggle, and they didn't have days off, pensions, vacation days. And so they could be more thoroughly exploited by the billionaires who outsourced male jobs. That's something that Trump doesn't talk about when he talks about bringing back those powerful, wonderful times of the 1950s and making America golden again, which he means sexist, racist, and industrial. The communist and socialist trade unions in France and Germany and all over Scandinavia prevented their jobs from being outsourced. So they didn't suffer the kinds of changes that Americans have suffered. The old-fashioned masculinity for white men was very mixed up with having a well-paying job that supported dependent women and children. So with the outsourcing for profit, gender norms were really upended. And Valentines and romance started to look very different. In the very late 60s and early 70s, the women's liberation movement sprang up in response to the unfair demands on women. Because at that point, as women were needed to work outside the home, the gender norms of requiring women to work in the home full-time, white women, to support men emotionally, to socially connect men, to create order and cleanliness and cooked food for men, to bring up men's children, that became very, very difficult. The old saw of women that was a stereotype, women dragging men to the altar, stopped. Blue-collar men have great difficulty finding wives. And marriage has become a luxury good, restricted to those people who have the money to hire other women to do the domestic chores. They can hire housekeepers. They can hire nannies. They can put their children in daycare, which is very expensive. The average daycare for an infant is $21,000 a year, even though daycare workers are poorly paid. That's very, very expensive. And their cooking can be replaced by takeout food in expensive restaurants that are family restaurants. And so that whole landscape of love, romance, and marriage is really altered. And the culprit is not uppity women, as Republicans would have us believe, but capitalist greed. Minority women never had men who earned family wages as a whole. And so minority women developed community networks and family networks to help them care for their children. Now the majority of marriages end in separation or divorce. A legal divorce costs $7,000. So at least 10% of people who are not counted just split. They don't have formal separations or divorces. Often they don't have children to fight over or assets to fight over, so they can just split by mutual agreement. First marriage is now 41% of legally processed first marriages end in separation or divorce that's legal, and then another 10% through agreement. So that's 50% of first marriages, and by the same token, if you count the informal as well as the formal, 70% of second marriages and 83% of third marriages end in formal or informal separation or divorce. In the 50s and until the early 70s, marriage was a rite of passage into adulthood. One got to a certain age, found a mate, got married, and had children. But that's changed. Women are no longer willing or able to try to work double shifts of working one shift in the capitalist workplace and another when they get home, in child rearing, in child care, in connecting men to their children and their relatives, in emotional care for men and sexual care for men. It's just too much. And although the Republicans declare that they're going to bring back the golden days of marriage and family, of course it just can't work. When men and women marry now, they don't marry because women need economic support for their work in the home while men are working outside the home. Couples marry or don't marry but just live together primarily for emotional support, social support, shared beliefs and values. This is a really changed landscape. Women had a movement to help us navigate this changed landscape, to empower ourselves in the workplace, to extend our support and our social means of support in terms of abortion rights, birth control rights, solidarities, support for divorce and separation, rape crisis centers, battered women's shelters. Men did not have support for their changed roles, and they therefore are suffering greatly because they don't have that support. And the whole landscape of romance, of love, has changed. It used to be that you fell in love, you got married. Now they have what's called assortative mating. And that's that you pair up with somebody who is of your financial status. That's why blue-collar men can't get married the way they used to. In fact, couples often look up each other's credit rating before they get together. And in addition, with the morning after pill, with the birth control pill, and with abortion rights, women don't have to get married to have children. Because if they don't want children, they don't have to have them. And if they want them, they can have one without marriage. So Valentine's Day comes this year on a vastly altered terrain. The presidential election of 2016 really illustrated that. You had Trump and Melania, the old deal of a rich old man acquiring a young, shapely woman who needs money. Melania was over 25. If you're over 25, you're kind of aging out of all modeling except for liquor ads and cigarette ads. She was very stiff, so she never was a very successful model. She needed money. She married a rich man who needed a beautiful woman on his arm for show. The Clintons' marriage was more like a corporate deal. When they both started out, they had no money. Later on, they acquired at least $15 million. In Arkansas, when they were in trouble financially because Clinton lost the election that he ran for, they both devised a plan to blame teachers' greed for more money for Arkansas's lost revenues. They moved to the right, and they made a lot of money. So theirs is more like a corporate merger. Bill runs around grabbing people in motels, but that's okay. It's a corporate merger. Bernie Sanders and his wife, Jane, showed a whole different model of gender marriage. Jane is his age. She looks his age. And she was seen hugging Bernie when he was disappointed in being forced out of the election, and he was crying. That's the kind of marriage and the kind of couple that a lot of people try for today, a kind of emotionally available partnership of shared values. Jean is Bernie's equal. It's an equal marriage. She's his emotional support, and he is hers. So that the whole landscape of romance in the United States has changed. It has changed in that there are not the economic conditions of existence that would support dependent wives and children and wage-earning males, because the wages don't pay. Wages for men have been flat since the late 70s in terms of what you can actually buy. Jobs have been exported to make even more money for the top corporate, not earners, but receivers of money of other people's labor. And so that those old romance ideas of love and marriage going together no longer hold. So it's not only, there has been a true revolution in romance. It's the only revolution that's happened in the United States. And partly people became less politically active because they were trying to sort out vastly altered personal lives. And America is now going through a huge change in what love and marriage mean. And that change is not stopped by Trump declaring that this is our golden age, since it's not golden for the vast majority of the population, or Vance excoriating women who don't have children and threatening childless couples, and the transportation secretary saying he will give transportation funds to those states who have the most marriages and the most children, which, by the way, are all Republican states, but not the ones that need roads and repairs most urgently. But what I want to say is that the changes inflicted by corporations have changed the entire gender landscape. And so our Valentine's Day is a very different kind of day with a different kind of meaning from that which it used to have. Thank you. Goodbye for now.